in a formal way at a pandal in Delhi, pandal in Jaipur. And then they were put in a box and shipped and brought into the temple room and Abhishek, etc. Then Prabhupada came to visit shortly thereafter, like a few months thereafter. On one of those occasions when Prabhupada came, he arrived before the devotees arrived from the airport, because they all went, in those days there wasn't TSA, you could go anywhere in the airport. So we did, to greet him. And the plan was the driver would take a more indirect route and the cars would take a direct route, and the devotees would be there at the temple to receive him when he came to the temple. But that's not the way it worked. He arrived there and he came before the deities, paid obeisances, and one of his Mataji disciples, Varanasi, saw when he left the temple room, there was a puddle of his tears. And she knew exactly what to do. She gathered up all the water and smeared it all over her body and ran out in the hall and told everybody what just happened. She just took a bath in Prabhupada's tears. And another time, maybe some of you know, at least by name, Palika Dasi, a wonderful disciple of Prabhupada. She was on the ladies' side of the room when Prabhupada came before the deities, and tears went streaming from his eyes like a squirt gun, syringe, and it hit the floor and splashed and hit her. We read in Nectar Devotion, that's one of the symptoms of ecstasy. He didn't talk about it. He just was on that platform of consciousness. So back to the Brahma Vimohana Lila. This is a painting where Brahma is kneeling before Krishna after a whole scene which we're going to narrate this evening. And it begins in chapter 12, where the cowherd boys are taking the calves out to pasture. Now, the age of Krishna at this time is 4. Because when he turns 5, he starts herding the cows. So he's 4. He started herding the calves when he was 3 years, 4 months. It was like the whole of the cowherd community were really happy, because here's a young boy who's taking up the family business. Cowherd business. Such a nice description. When the childhood pastimes of Krishna performed in Gokul, starting with the killing of Putana when he was just a few days old, and Shakatasura, and pulling over the twin Arjun trees, and Trinavarta, and so the elders came together, headed by Nanda's elder brother, Upananda, having an elders meeting, considering moving from Gokula. Too many demons, dangerous for our children, especially Krishna. And second reason was the cows have eaten all the grass on this side, and on the other side there's all fresh grass in Vrindavan forest. And the third reason was it's under Kamsa's rule, and so protection may come if we need some help. So they agreed, and they shifted. There's a nice description of the details of how that happened. And when they reached the other side, Krishna was very happy. Not that he's other than happy, but he became very happy because this is his eternal home, Vrindavan. Of the 12 forests, this particular forest was his favorite, Vrindavan forest. And it's said specifically he and Balaram were most happy to be along the banks of the river Jamuna in the forest of Vrindavan, and the third was very near Govardhan Hill. And shortly after they all shifted to the western side of the river Jamuna, Krishna wanted to go with his father. Balaram and Krishna went with Nanda Maharaj taking care of the cows. And very quickly, the cowherd men noticed that they didn't have to herd the cows because the cows just followed behind Krishna wherever Krishna went. They were just completely attached to Krishna. And they were marveling. Their job was made really easy, and it's just a natural service for him. So Krishna then started asking his father, no, he started asking his mother if he could go herd the cows. She gave the no answer. You know how big those cows are? You're so small, you're just 3 years old. No. So Krishna wasn't discouraged. He went to his father and petitioned his father. And after some time it was negotiated, he could take the calves, but he had to come back for lunch because the cows were out all day and came back in the evening. He had to come back for lunch. So Krishna and Balaram started taking care of the calves from 3 years, 4 months. And there were a lot of cows, so there were a lot of calves, and there were a lot of cowherd boys. And chapter 12 begins with, and we'll see some images and describe it a little bit, what they did during the day from the time that they left Nandagram and went out to herd the calves. And it leads to Brahma's prayers. So that's what we're focusing on, but it's good to get the context. Lord Brahma's prayers, it's chapter 14. So chapter 12 opens with the cowherd boys getting ready to go. Even before the sun would come up, there they were at the house of Nanda Maharaj at Nandagram, telling Krishna, hurry up, let's go, let's go. And after dressing Krishna and having Krishna's breakfast and Mother Yasoda doing this very elaborate description in Brihat Bhagavatamrita. That's where this picture is taken from. Like a doting, affectionate mother, every 2 steps Krishna took to go towards taking care of the calves, she had to adjust his garland and put another samosa in his lunch bag. And because this particular morning, there was a plan that Krishna had for a Lila, and it required that Balaram wasn't there. And it also required that the boys brought their own lunch, like a special picnic lunch. So after so many attempts to leave, and Mother Yasoda being so motherly, affectionate, and attached, Krishna kept saying, I have to go now, I have to go now. And finally he left, and she stood there like a stone carving, staring at the direction that Krishna had gone in, because all she could see was the dust raised from the hooves of the calves. And with great separation, she went back to attend to her duties at home. And the cowherd boys, with many, 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 many calves, went off in their business of taking care of the calves in the forest of Vrindavan. But the real activity we hear wasn't really herding the calves, because the calves just followed wherever Krishna went. Mainly it was just playful activity of little boys. You'll put little 4-year-old boys together, and what do? They play. And they find different ways of playing. So this painting is showing sometimes they would imitate a frog in a crouched position ready to jump, or a peacock with a peacock's tail spread, or a bird getting ready to take flight, and making the sounds of the forest animals and all those playful activities that boys will do. Sometimes they had a game where they stole one boy's lunch. In this case, right in the middle, that's Madhu Mangal. And they took his lunch bag and ran. And when Madhu Mangal nearly caught up, the lunch bag would be tossed to another boy. Then he'd run to the other boy who would toss the bag to another boy. And Madhu Mangal would start to cry and say, "You've stolen the property of a Brahmana, you're in big trouble." And they would laugh. And then they'd give him his lunch. Sometimes they'd sit under a tree. Krishna would play upon his flute. The calves would graze nearby, and the boys would simply be mesmerized by the beautiful sound of Krishna's flute playing. And in so many ways, there's pages and pages of the playful activity of the young boys. And in that mood of playfulness, it's abundantly expressed. That's just their mood. They came to a place on a path that they traveled nearly every day, and instead of seeing the path, they saw this giant. They didn't know what it was. It looked like, some of them conjectured, maybe this is a place for playing that Krishna created for us. And some got closer, and they smelled this bad, fishy smell coming from the mouth of this giant creature. And they said, it's not a play place, it's a serpent. The serpent wants to swallow us. And some of the boys started to run. And some of the other boys said, no, no, no. Even if that's what it is, no need to worry, because we've all had so much experience. Krishna will always save us. Save us. So let's go explore. So they went marching into the mouth of Agasura. Now, Agasura was 8 miles long, and his upper jaw was touching the clouds. He was just gigantic creature. And there's a really nice section that describes how Krishna became perplexed. Now, he's the supreme omniscient person. So his becoming perplexed is not like anyone else's, ours or anybody else's. Rather, he didn't want the cowherd boys to enter the serpent's mouth. And his reason was, they're so much attached to me, if they can't see me even for a moment, they may faint or lose consciousness. So he didn't want that to happen. One of the unlimited potencies of Krishna that leads or gives direction to the other potencies is Satya Sankalpa Shakti. Satya Sankalpa Shakti means whenever Krishna desires something, it happens. Sankalpa. Satya Sankalpa Shakti. Or sometimes Icha Shakti. He just desires. And then all the other potencies immediately spring into action to fulfill that desire. So in this case, Krishna had a desire. He didn't want the cowherd boys to enter the mouth of the Agasura demon, and yet they entered the mouth of the Agasura demon. And Krishna was surprised. The Acharyas comment that he was marveling at how his own Yogamaya potency was conducting herself to enhance his happiness by his being in anxiety about the welfare of the cowherd boys. And then in the next moment, he knew exactly what to do. Yogamaya curtain drew back again, and he knew exactly what to do. He also entered into the mouth of the Agasura demon. And when that happened, that's when the demon closed his mouth, because he wanted to kill Krishna. One of Krishna's names is Yogeshwara. He's the Ishvara of all mystic yogic powers. And one of those mystic yogic powers is Mahima Siddhi. He became big and bigger and bigger and bigger. And this serpent, Aghasura, was a python. And pythons can swallow really big creatures. So his body expanded and expanded as Krishna's body and expanded. But Krishna won because he's unlimited. And anything other than unlimited is limited. So he suffocated. And when he suffocated, the soul within that big serpent body popped through the soft spot at the top of his head and shone in the sky like a bright sun and hovered there for a moment until Krishna departed the mouth of the serpent along with the cowherd boys, and the soul of Aghasura merged into Krishna's body, and he achieved liberation, Sayuja Mukti. The boys saw this, and they saw that Aghasura was now dead, and they were marveling, oh, well done, well done. Let's go have lunch. Because that was the routine. Demons, we have principal demons that are mentioned in 10th Canto Bhagavatam and some elsewhere in other Puranas. But our acharyas teach us that daily at least two, around 11 o'clock and around 4 o'clock, because it was a signal time for lunch or time to return home. Because the boys were into playing so much, they wouldn't eat or they wouldn't have gone home. They just would have played. So it was part of the arrangement of Krishna's pastimes during the course of his day in Vrindavan. The demon would come, there would be some conflict, Krishna would kill the demon, and then they would go and have lunch. So as they were having lunch, Lord Brahma happened to be visiting Vrindavan at that time. Now, it's worth stepping back from the whole narration a little bit. Krishna only appears once in each day of Brahma, which means that each day of Brahma, he comes to the earthly realm to come pay his respects to Krishna. But each day of Brahma is a very long time. And it plays into the chapter 13 of this canto, because the earthly period of time is 1,000 yuga cycles, and his night is of equal duration. That's a long time. One yuga cycle, 4,320,000 times 1,000. You add 3 more zeros. And that's one day of Brahma. And then one night of Brahma times 2. And that's how often he comes to the earthly realm. But for him, it's just one day. So he comes to pay his respects. Because Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavye, Krishna imparted knowledge of all the Vedas into the heart of Brahma. So he knew he's highly elevated in knowledge, and he knew who Krishna was. And when he saw this pastime of the killing of Aghasura, the liberation of Aghasura, and then the cowherd boys just sat together. Krishna's at the center, like the whorl of a lotus, and each of the cowherd boys, like petals of the lotus, seated around Krishna and having their lunch. So Brahma started doing what intelligent people sometimes do. He became curious. And the curiosity of Brahma was, what is the limit of Krishna's mystic powers? which that's not a problem, having that kind of marveling at what he just saw. But the problem was what he decided to do, again by Yogamaya's influence, he decided to use his mystic powers to see what Krishna would do with his mystic powers. He'd match his mystic powers against Krishna's. That was a bad idea. But it turned out that he got the answer to his question. The answer to his question is absolutely no limit. Krishna's opulence is limitless. So, in addition to challenging Krishna with his mystic power, here's another painting of the same. On the right side, that same Brahma wanted to show some of his own power and see the power of Krishna, who was engaged in his childhood pastimes, playing as if with ordinary cowherd boys. Therefore, in Krishna's absence, Brahma took all the boys and calves to another place. Thus he became entangled, for in the very near future he would see how powerful Krishna was. So what happened was, as the boys were having their lunch by the side of the river Jamuna, the calves were grazing, and they started moving to greener grasses, and the calves were missing. And some of the boys noticed the calves are missing, and Krishna said, "Don't worry, I'll go find the calves, you finish your lunch." So Krishna got up, and the Bhagavatam says he searched everywhere, this place, that place, the other. He's omniscient. But he searched and he couldn't find them. The reason he couldn't find them was that Brahma had placed them in a cave and hidden them. So when Krishna went back to where the cowherd boys were having lunch, the cowherd boys were gone. Because by his mystic power, Brahma gathered up all the cowherd boys as well as the calves and also put them in a cave. And as it sometimes happens, people that do some mischief, they go back to the scene of the crime. So we went back to see what's Krishna going to do. Jiva Goswami says, Brahma was thinking, maybe he'll cry. Maybe he'll offer his prayers to me and say, "Oh, Brahma, you must know where are the calves and cowherd boys. Please bring them back." He was thinking in that way. But instead, when he went back to where he had kidnapped the calves and cowherd boys to see what Krishna would do, what did he see? He saw all the calves and cowherd boys. The cowherd boys sitting around having lunch. He was bewildered. So he went back to look in the cave, and there they were in the cave. Went back, and there they were having lunch. And then, as you see up in the sky, that's where Brahma is, riding on his swan carrier. In the next moment, all the cowherd boys that were having lunch simultaneously manifested forms of Narayana. And each of those forms of Narayana were being worshipped by the personified Vedas. And then it wasn't only the personified Vedas, but all the Vishnumurtis were surrounded by the opulences headed by Anima, Siddhi, so all mystic powers, by the mystic potencies headed by Aja, by the 24 elements for creation of the material world headed by the Mahatattva. And now note, all of these are personified. They're not just like a little energy and a little energy and some other energy over there. They're all personified. Then Lord Brahma saw that Kala, Swabhava, Samskara, Kama, Karma, and the Gunas, their own independence being completely subordinate to the potency of the Lord, had taken forms. What's the form of time look like? Who's even seen time? We can measure time, but what does it look like? What's the form of time? The form of swabhava, the form of kama, the form of each of the modes of nature. Now, these are their spiritual counterparts because there's the material counterpart, the reflection of each of these, and he's seeing the spiritual original form. I mean, it's fascinating. I've been preparing some writing on Sri Brahma Samhita, and the similar, it's Brahma's realizations from Brahma Samhita, and he sees all these things personified. It's mind-boggling. It makes sense at the same time to conceive of it. It's inconceivable. It's reasonable, but to conceive of it is it's inconceivable. Unlimited potencies, each with spiritual form, each of which has their reflected presentation in the material world. We saw all of that, and they're all worshiping each one of these forms for as many cowherd boys as there are cowherd boys. So he realized the cowherd boys aren't the same ones that are in the cave. These cowherd boys are Krishna's expansion that looks just like each cowherd boy. And in the next moment, so here the phrase in the Sanskrit verse is Nija Mahimani. Nija means his own. Mani means jewel or his glory, whose own glory was without limit. Now, during that period of time, because the passage of time in the heavenly realm is not the same as the passage of time here, the passage of time in Brahma's experience of time is not the same experience of passage of time here. So, in those moments that Brahma was gone, looking to see where the calves were back in the cave, during that period of time, the cowherd boys went back. The ones that were Krishna, the ones that were the original cowherd boys were still in the cave. But the ones that were Krishna went back to Vrindavan, and and for 1 year, the cowherd boys that were Krishna were being mothered by their mothers and fathered by their fathers because their mother and father had love for Krishna more than they had for their own sons, which isn't worldly. Parents can have liking for some other child, but it's not. They have affection for another child more than their own child. That's not normal. But all of them had this desire, and Krishna was reciprocating with the desire. They wished to have Krishna as their son. So Krishna became their son. And the cows, out of maternal affection, they desired to give their milk directly to Krishna, like they gave to their calves. So Krishna became their calves. And the likeness was so exact that the mothers didn't even recognize this wasn't their son. They thought it was their son. The voice inflection, the personality, the everything, it's inconceivable. But it's Krishna's reciprocation with the residents of Vrindavan to have that intimacy. This particular painting is showing an incident where the cows were grazing on side of Govardhan Hill, and the calves were at the bottom of Govardhan Hill. And when the cows saw the calves, they started running to be with their calves. Has anyone seen a cow run before? It's really funny, isn't it? They don't run like a horse, but they can run, but it's really clumsy. So they were running down the hill, and the cowherd men that were herding the cows had their sticks raised. Come back, come back. However you say that in local language. And they didn't come back. So the men were angry, but by the time they reached the bottom of the hill and saw their sons, they forgot their anger and just embraced their sons because it's Krishna. And the calves were being served very nicely by their mothers, the cows. And this went on for a whole year. The acharyas describe little boys that are 4 years old to 5 years old. They grow. So they grew, but Krishna grew. And Balaram, who hadn't been with Krishna the day that the Yagasura demon and all of that happened, by Yogamaya's influence, he didn't even recognize what was going on. Till towards the end of the year, the Yogamaya curtain started to pull back, and he started to see things. And he put two and two together. And he asked Krishna, is this what's happening? And Krishna just smiled. So at the end of that 1 year of earthly time, the prayers of Brahma began. Or while those prayers of Brahma were going on, this 1 year passed on earth, you could say that, because Krishna took Balaram to a secluded place. That image is after poof, everything just disappeared. All the Narayan forms and all the potencies of Narayan and all worshipping, and then in an instant, in a flash, it was all withdrawn. Krishna's internal potency was withdrawn. Brahma fainted. He regained consciousness. As we saw, he was standing before Krishna and offering these prayers. And that's where chapter 14 begins. So how is it possible to know the unknowable? It's possible if the unknowable discloses the unknowable, at least to the capacity of an individual. It's very same idea, very similar idea, not same, as the first 7 verses of chapter 10 Bhagavad Gita. In those verses, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, saying that even the greatest rishis and demigods and learned personalities, etc., cannot know me. They do not know me and they cannot know me. And the reason they cannot know me is I existed before they existed. So how do you know what existed before you existed? You can't. Unless there's disclosure. And then you can know, but it takes faith. Even with disclosure, it takes faith. But supposing somebody doesn't have faith in the disclosure, that's chapter 12. Then they're going to have faith in something else, according to the modes of nature, because faith is intrinsic to the soul. One will have transcendental faith, or one will have material faith according to the modes of nature. But faith is intrinsic to the soul. So to know the unknowable, what to speak who has unlimited potencies, it's by disclosure. And that was, Brahma is a great devotee. Obviously, he's the head of our sampradaya. He's a great devotee. The Vedas were imparted onto his heart. I mean, for a thousand celestial years, there was nothing but darkness. How long do we survive? There was, I mean, no friendship. I mean, who knows even what he ate or anything. He just did his tapasya, and Krishna revealed everything to him. So he is not an ordinary person, yet he did this unusual thing. My understanding is it was inspired by Krishna to do like that because there was a purpose, multiple purposes. One of those multiple purposes was for Krishna to expand himself as calves and cowherd boys for 1 year, and then to have Brahma's realizations peak by what Krishna showed him. Not that Brahma, was a slow person, a dull person, but he had a desire, and Krishna fulfilled this desire beyond any question. So it made him very humble, and whatever tendency or trace of pride was there was gone. We're going to go through. I have to go over here. A few verses, starting with verse number 1. Here we go. I made this color coded so that the words in the verse have their Sanskrit counterpart. O son of the king of the cowherds, Pashupanga Jaya, Lord Brahma said. So this is just his darshan. My dear Lord, you are the only worshipable Lord, Idya Te, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore I offer my humble obeisances and prayers just to please you. O son of the king of the cowherds, your transcendental body is dark blue like a new cloud. Your garment is brilliant like lightning, and the beauty of your face is enhanced by your gunja earrings and the peacock feather on your head, Paripicha. Wearing garlands of various forest flowers and leaves, and equipped with a herding stick, a buffalo horn, and a flute, you stand beautifully with a morsel of food in your hand. Now remember, they were midway through eating. And notice in the picture, is Krishna had the food in his left hand because he eats with his right hand. And he's standing underneath a tree. And Brahma is having this realization of, especially as we go along with the rest of the prayers, this is the original form of all existence. All the Vishnu forms, all the spiritual potencies, all the material potencies, everything with which Brahma engineered the universe, everything comes from this original form of Krishna. He has this specific realization. So while Brahma is offering these nice prayers to Krishna, this is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes. He's predicating the mind of Krishna by saying, I'm a cowherd boy. Why are you worshiping me? You are Lord Brahma. Brahma literally means that you are the greatest, most powerful, most knowledgeable, all-knowing person in the universe. That is you. Why are you offering your obeisances to me? And then he gives his reasons. Why? My dear Lord, neither I nor anyone else can estimate the potency of this transcendental body of yours, which has shown such mercy to me, and which appears just to fulfill the desire of your pure devotees. Although my mind is completely withdrawn from material affairs, I cannot understand your all spiritual, personal form. How then could I possibly understand the happiness you experience within yourself? His question was, what's the limit of his power? And the answer is, there is no limit, because he saw it. Now he's expressing it. Although he's qualified, my mind is completely withdrawn from material affairs. Now he's built the universe, but he built the universe as devotional service. And back in Canto 2, Chapter 9, he was offered benediction by Lord Vishnu. And the benediction he requested was, please protect me from false ego, so that I not think of myself as the creator of this universe, because it's you, and I'm simply your instrument. So although he was engaged with the material energy, he wasn't enamored by it. His mind was completely withdrawn from material affairs. Material affairs means forgetfulness of Krishna affairs. He was dealing with that energy, but in full Krishna consciousness throughout. Not like he had a nice time when he was doing a sadhana and he got all these nice realizations in the Brahma Samhita prayers, and then he started building the universe and he got bewildered again. No. It's in Brahma Samhita. After those very beautiful Govindam prayers, there's a final 5 verses where he's not asking a question, but Krishna is understanding his mind and answers the unasked question. The question of Brahma is, I have all these realizations. Now, I also know that my service to you is to build the universe. And I have a doubt. When I start building universe, how am I going to keep my consciousness fixed on you? You know, one of the common questions I'm asked is, I get it. Krishna Bhakti, sadhana in the morning and sadhana in the evening, but what about 9 to 5? I sit down at my workstation and I'm absorbed in my work. If 5 o'clock comes around, oh yeah, I'm supposed to remember Krishna. That's different ways of asking that question. So that was Brahma's doubt. Because if I don't do my duty, then that's sinful. And if I do my duty, I'll become forgetful. So what to do? Good question. And that those 5 chapters give the answer. The essence of the answer is you join them with the primary activities of bhakti. Bhakti Siddhanta uses this phrase, gona dharma. Gona dharma means secondary dharmas. There's the primary, the 9 activities of bhakti, and gona dharma is the rest of what we do. In Brahma's case, it was building universe. But when those gona dharmas are joined with the primary activities of bhakti, then the Gona Dharmas are as purifying as the primary activities of bhakti. So my mind is completely withdrawn from material affairs. Still, I cannot understand your all spiritual form, because being withdrawn from material affairs isn't the eligibility. One of the requirements of both the Gyanis and the yogis, for anyone practicing any kind of Gyan yoga or Dhyan yoga, their essential is control of the senses and control of the mind. For bhakti also, essential. How the approach and the method is different, but the principle is the same, controlling the mind and the senses. And he's not just a yogi or a Gyani, although he has knowledge. The upcoming verses are very powerful, where the process of Gyan is really just insufficient to know Krishna. The process of Gyan is insufficient, and controlling the mind is insufficient. Completely withdrawing the mind from material affairs. Completely withdrawing the mind from material affairs, the term, one of the terms in Sanskrit is nirvana, cessation of material existence. How coveted is nirvana for the Buddhists? That's their goal. But even if one achieves nirvana, they cannot possibly understand Krishna's form. And Brahma is speaking like that as far as himself. Then what to speak of the happiness he experiences within himself. So he's acknowledging his tininess. He's acknowledging the unlimitedness of Krishna. And he is going to now focus on the bhakti process as the means to know the unknowable. So here's Vishwanath again. Brahma saying, I desire to examine the extent of your potency. I desire to understand how you will react to my showing my power. In turn, you have shown such mercy to me by giving me a glimpse of who you actually are. And that was in his prayer. You've been very kind to me. And one of the mercifulnesses is, Brahma is a highly elevated person. He's not just a nice Prabhu. He is a highly elevated person. And when Krishna revealed, he fully understood the significance of all of what he saw. You have shown such mercy to me, by giving me a glimpse of who you actually are. Then, how can one estimate something that is unlimited, which can produce unlimited entities, each having unlimited potencies? So this is the distinction between Gyan and Bhakti. Gyan cannot do that. By Bhakti, it can do that. And this is where we're going to end this verse number 3. Celebrated verse. Everyone knows the verse. Gyane prayasam udapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukharitam bhavadiyavartam stanes tatakshrutigatam tanavan manobir ye prayaso jitachito pyasi traistrilokyam. Those who, even while remaining situated in their established social position, that's this third line, stanes tatak, while remaining situated in their established social positions, throw away the process of speculative knowledge, gyane prayasa udapasya, and instead namanta eva, with their body, mind, and words. In the end of the third line, tanu means body. Van or vak means words, and mana, dedicating, um, excuse me, with their body, mind, and words, offer all respect to descriptions of your personality and activities. Shruti Gatam. So it's not just hearing, but offering all respects to descriptions of your personality and activities, dedicating their lives to these narrations. And the commentary, this Bhavadiyavartam, gets a lot of attention. Dedicating their lives to these narrations. So it's not just attending the Bhagavatam class or reading Bhagavad Gita in your reading groups or something like that. It's dedicating your lives to these narrations, which are vibrated by you personally and by your pure devotees, certainly conquer your lordship. Yea, prayaso jita. Ajita, one who cannot be conquered, becomes conquered. Ajita becomes jita. Otherwise unconquerable by anyone within the three worlds. Now, this verse was the verse that was told by Ramananda Roy to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The painting is they're meeting on the banks of the river Godavari. In the background, you see the ministers that were accompanying Ramananda Roy. And over on the right, the associates of Mahaprabhu. And when the two met, they were in sheer ecstasy, so much so that the ministers couldn't understand what's going on. So they met in the evening and started their discussions. One of the 5 main shiksha sections of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Lord Chaitanya's question to Ramananda Roy, what's the goal of life, sadhya, and the means to achieve it, sadhana? That's a nice place to start a discussion. Different verses were quoted by Ramananda Roy. Lord Chaitanya kept saying, going further, go further, go further. Finally, in referring to this verse, he says, pure devotional service without any touch of speculative knowledge is the essence of perfection. So the jnane prayasa udapasya, and then further delineation of what pure devotional service is, dedicating one's lives to the narrations of the topics of Krishna and his activities. Here's another nicer painting, very clear painting, same pastime. The same idea is presented in the teachings of the Hansa avatar. There we see the Hansa avatar giving instructions to Lord Brahma, and surrounding Lord Brahma's form is the 4 Kumars. And he's giving a similar teaching. The similar teaching is to see the relationship between all things and the source of all things without just seeing the things. Seeing the connection between all things and the source of all things. If we don't see the factual relationship between matter and Krishna, we're not accurately seeing. Now here's similar on the banks of the Godavari, Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy speaking. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Mahabhagavata, the advanced devotee, certainly sees everything mobile and immobile, but he does not exactly see their forms. Rather, everywhere he immediately sees manifest the form of the Supreme Lord. Now, this is it's how to see Krishna everywhere. It's an important verse. And the abandonment of Gyan, the acceptance of the process of hearing, and dedicating oneself to the topics of hearing, and so there's cleansing due to refraining from speculation and controlling the senses through the bhakti process, and then knowledge of Krishna becomes revealed. The unknowable becomes knowable. And when the unknowable becomes knowable, then one sees the relationship of all things with Krishna. Material vision means you don't see that connection, just absence. Maya means having Krishna covered by illusion. When illusion is taken away, then one can see the connection of all things. So you see the things. This is the explanation given in Prabhupada's purport to this verse in the discussion with Ramananda Roy. It's seeing Krishna everywhere. The Krishna conscious person does not see the tree. He sees Krishna present. That is Krishna consciousness. You don't see the tree, you see Krishna. This is taken directly from Prabhupada's lecture on this verse. Sanatana Goswami confirms in his commentary on this verse, because Sanatana Goswami, as you probably know, he made a commentary on the entire 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, every verse. And Vaishnava Toshani, 10th canto. So on this verse, here's Sanatana Goswami's commentary. He makes reference to Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Tam eva viditva. Freedom is possible only by understanding Brahman. Then he poses the question, then he answers the question. If that is the case, then how can an ignorant person attain liberation? This verse answers the question. How does he attain? By cessation of speculative knowledge and engaging himself instead in hearing topics of Krishna, coming from Krishna or his dear devotees, and dedicating his lives to those topics. And that way one can understand Brahman, Para-Brahman, Krishna. By the bhakti process, knowledge of Krishna becomes revealed. Here's again Vishwanath. By the hearing process, we develop such a loving, trusted relationship with Krishna that he will say, I am like this. You wanted to see me as I am. You wanted to serve me. Such a deep desire for so long, and I have tested you so many times, and you only chose me. Now here I am. Now that's Krishna's prerogative, but that's how one can know the unknowable, by disclosure. So Brahma's speaking, O Krishna, O Ajita, you are conquered by this path. Let me say more about the glorious process in contrast to Gyan. That's the coming verse. And I think we've covered a lot this evening. Sorry for the delay at the beginning, but Mahaprabhu wanted kirtan instead, so. See if there's any discussion. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. That was really wonderful class. One question, probably I need more elaboration on. You said that faith is intrinsic to the soul. Can you just elaborate on that?
Well, just like heat and heat and light are intrinsic to fire. Faith is intrinsic to the soul. It's of the soul. Consciousness is of the soul. Faith is of the soul. It's not from some other source. It's of the soul. Sweetness is of sugar. So
My question is more related to like some people have faith towards Krishna, some people do not have faith.
exactly, divisions of faith. That's how chapter 12 begins. Arjun says, what about those people that don't have faith in what you say? Do they have faith in something? The answer is yes. He doesn't say because faith is intrinsic to the soul, but they have faith in something because it's intrinsic to the soul. According to the modes, there's divisions of faith. So where does that faith come from? The modes modify or filter, but where's that quality of faith come from? It's from the soul. Where does heat and light come? It comes from fire. It's of the soul. So if we don't have faith in Krishna, we'll have faith in something. And we'll worship according to that faith. Worship demons or worship demigods or worship a materialistic person. Worship the demigods. It's gonna, some kind of worship is there because it's of the soul.
Another question related to that is like when we say the property of soul, it is such a ananda, right? So it has all the knowledge within, right? And if it has the knowledge, then it knows that Krishna is the supreme.
But knowledge becomes covered, isn't it? Knowledge becomes covered by Maya, and or by ignorance. The true knowledge of the soul becomes covered.
Then why the faith is wrong faith?
But again, same modes. And turning our attention away brings us to the modes. We turn our attention toward, then the influence of the modes diminish. But it's not just like snap your fingers, okay. We're implicated by conditioning. And the same thing with knowledge, like, through bhakti, there's knowledge where someone's just trying to cultivate knowledge without depending upon the Supreme Lord and trying to serve him. However, if one depends upon the Supreme Lord and tries to serve him, knowledge awakens. Correct? From Bhagavatam. Vasudevi Bhagavati. Janiyati ashu vairagyam jnanam cha yadahaitukam. Transcendental knowledge is intrinsic to the soul, and it awakens as bhakti awakens.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the wonderful class. So you were mentioning about the secondary dharma or Gauna dharma is equally important when you do it in conjugation with the primary dharma. Does it mean that you need to do it simultaneously?
You do it. We're conditioned souls, and we have requirements. We have to eat. We do things. We maintain our existence. Those aren't primary things. They're in relation to the temporary things of life. But we don't, switch them off. We connect them to transcendence. That's the secondary things. I mean, like in Brahma's case, it's building a universe. No, it's not. Every existence, he's building a universe. But in this lifetime, he's building the universe. So but that's secondary. And that's to be joined with the primary.
So in practical sense, if you are working in the office, you don't necessarily need to be thinking about Krishna like directly. But as long as you are practicing devotee, you are chanting your rounds in the morning, you are doing your duty worship in the morning, but you can continue to be 100% at your office, completely thinking about your job, your activities. I mean, is that still considered as a devotional service?
No.
Because you're not directly thinking
No.
about Krishna.
No. I mean, not directly. The idea that I shared from those different references. When there's, there are different words. Raga, when there's attraction, or asakti, when there's attachment. When that's in place, you're naturally thinking of the object of attachment or the object of attraction. Prabhupada's example. If parents see little baby shoes, they see their child. I mean, they don't see the little child running around, but in their mind's eye, they see the child because of their attachment for the child. It's natural. It happens. So similarly, when there's attachment for Krishna, you're in the office, and what are you in the office for? You're doing some dharma, some occupational duty that's meant to carry. It's part and parcel of your duties to Krishna's part and parcel living entities, your family members, etc., etc., etc. But when consciousness of Krishna awakens, then you're conscious of Krishna while you're in the workplace. This is for Krishna. And it comes gradually. The prior to gradually is at least karma yoga. You offer the results unto Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
But with the bhakti process, it's not just offering the results unto Krishna. We offer ourselves unto Krishna. And it's a transition from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. Material consciousness means forgetfulness. So your question specifically, is it okay if we're forgetful? But we did some nice chanting in the morning and reading Bhagavad Gita in the evening, and we attended Mangal Arti. Well, that's a beginning. That's a beginning, but it's not the essence of a life of Krishna consciousness in the workplace. That's not what going to Dharma indicates. To join those things or connect those things with Krishna means in stages, progressive stages, mindfulness of the person who you're serving. The forgetfulness of who you're serving is you're serving the supervisor in the workplace. Your business is to please the supervisor. And, to some degree, some false ego to accomplish the task that's given to you, in some sense of fulfillment that I accomplished the task given to me. It's false ego. And the sense of satisfaction by accomplishing tasks. Mode of passion and false ego. So that's not the essence of Krishna consciousness. It's not. So the beginning stage is you do nice sadhana, and then you got to disconnect. The 9 to 5 disconnect, and that's not okay. I mean, it's part of a transition stage. It's not. Let's take Maharaj Ambarish. He perfect example. He didn't go to the office 9 to 5, but he ruled the kingdom. He ruled the world, and he did intense sadhana every morning for hours, worshiping his Krishna deity and doing everything that he did. Savai Mana Krishna Padarama. So by that Mana Krishna practice, then one's mind is with Krishna throughout the day, because it's for him that I'm doing what I'm doing. because I'm attached to him.
Thank you, Maharaj.
We have occupation, the modern circumstances, we have occupations that by design they're very disconnected. I mean, not deliberate design, just by default design. You know, but the principle is that we have one master. There are persons that may think that they're their master. We may honor them and respect them appropriately because they have some service to do and they're to be respected. But they're not our master. They may think they're your master, but they're not your master. And the Krishna conscious person wants to please their master. That's to start dasya, start. Throughout the day, 24/7. Someone else?
Krishna Maharaj. So I want to know that a little more. I am just a little confused. Svetaswara Upanishad talking about the freedom and connect with this verse. How we have to understand what types of freedom talking about?
The verse quoted by Sanatana Goswami, that one?
Yes.
Freedom is possible. This is Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Tam eva viditva. Freedom is possible only by understanding Brahman. So, not understanding Brahman means you're covered. Understanding Brahman means the covering has been removed. When the covering has been removed, then you have freedom. When the covering is in place, you're confined by that covering, the conditioning. So freedom means minimally Brahmabhuta, to know who you are, as opposed to being confined or restricted or under the ropes of upadhis, who we aren't, that the designations of identity. That's freedom. There's many other things, but it's also freedom.
If that is the case, then just giving answer by this verse.
Yeah, yeah. So by bhakti, not by gyan, one can become liberated. So what about persons that aren't really smart? Can not really smart people become free? Can they know Brahman? By bhakti, one can know Brahman. You don't have to be, an erudite scholar. You can be a simple person and know Krishna and be free. But very learned people are not necessarily free. They're caught up in pride and what they know. Many, not all, but many. It's common. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Something else?
I had one question on the last slide you had,
Which one?
the next one. Yeah, so here, I think Vishnu Chakravarti says, I have tested you so many times. So how do we see this? I mean, how do we understand it's a Krishna's test versus our weakness or our maybe lackadaisical approach in devotion?
That's not a test. That's Maya. The testing, a really nice Burijan Prabhu gave a 3-part seminar during the Govardhan retreat on Untitled Lila Chapter 4. Untitled Lila Chapter 4 is Sanatan being tested by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there's a particular word that's used. He was examined or tested. And in the beginning part of that discussion, Sanatan is giving, Lord Chaitanya is giving report to Sanatan that his brother Anupam left his body, because Anupam left his body when Rupa Goswami was on his way with Anupam to go join Mahaprabhu in Puri. Anupam died on the way along the Ganges. Rupa Goswami stayed with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for a year. When he left Puri, 10 days later, Sanatana Goswami arrived. 10 days later, Sanatana Goswami arrived. So Mahaprabhu gave him the word, the unfortunate news, his younger brother Anupam has left this world. And then Sanatana Goswami tells a story of how he and Rupa tested Anupam. The same word is used. They examined him or tested him by trying to persuade him to become a Krishna Bhakta. And he couldn't. They were testing him. And then they praised him. Oh, you're such a wonderful Ram Bhakta. They were examining him or testing him. So when Krishna does that testing, that's the kind it is. He, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, also tested or examined Sanatana Goswami to bring him to the point of abject dependence on Lord Chaitanya. And that's what Haridas appreciated. From his perspective, Mahaprabhu made this whole arrangement. He made the arrangements you would get this disease. He made the arrangement so that you would get some teachings about etiquette. He made the arrangement to chastise Junior Haridas. No, not Junior Haridas. No, that's a different pastime. Jagatananda Pandit. He made the arrangement to prevent you from giving up your body under the cart of Jagannath. He prevented you from leaving the Puri to go back to Vrindavan. You were checkmated. And then he embraced you. And then he took the whole disease away. But he was testing you to bring you to the point of complete surrender. Because he was ready to do other things, but he couldn't act outside of Lord Chaitanya's, wish for him. That was the testing, examining. And then Lord Chaitanya revealed his love for him. So that's altogether different than our petty weakness and willy-nilly things.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the great class. So it is mentioned that Krishna will be revealed to those who completely believes him and who has complete faith in him. And it is said that who has a speculative knowledge, they can never be seen. So
One who has what?
speculative thinking.
Speculative knowledge.
And how to avoid this speculative thinking can you elaborate on this one? What does the speculative thinking means? Like questioning the Krishna's power is it
No,
speculative thinking?
Being inquisitive is good. Trying to get the answer to that inquisitiveness through your mental power in and of itself, that's speculative knowledge. It's incomplete, it's insufficient, it's inconclusive. So the other question is how to get on the other side of it. Well, you recognize it. It requires intelligence. Intelligence means to distinguish or discern or discriminate between this and that. So let's just take reading Bhagavad Gita. You can read Bhagavad Gita as a Gyani, or you can read Bhagavad Gita as a Bhakta. And there's the knowledge of Gyan from the speculator. This means that. And then there's the awakening of nourishing of bhakti by the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to understand the greatness of Krishna. And then as bhakti awakens, then knowledge becomes fruitful, because it becomes fruitful in the form of realization that inspires further bhakti. Further bhakti means specifically that Krishna is to be pleased. Just like this question over here about in the workplace. Now there's a question that can be a discerning point between this and that, but it becomes bhakti when it moves into the arena of nourishing my focus on my purpose is to please Krishna. And I may not be so good at it in the workplace, but I want to be good at it in other areas, and then it'll grow in the workplace too. Let my inquisitiveness nourish my focus on Krishna is to be pleased. That all my activities. Here's a little example. In our devotee communities, it's super common that young people are attracted to kirtan. Super common everywhere. When it's kirtan time, they're there, they got their instruments and they go at it. And when it's time for japa, now, one of the things that can be done to help young people that like kirtan is to understand it's not the musicality, it's the making that offering to Krishna, because their energy is already into the kirtan. To know how to direct that energy to come before the deity and for the pleasure of the deity, not for the pleasure of your social relationships with one another and how you can do this and that and the other thing with your musical instruments. But that Krishna is to be pleased. And same with anything. With cooking. With speaking. With our, Vaishnava etiquette. That Krishna is to be pleased. And as much as we learn things and it nourishes that inner desire to let my activity, let my life, my existence be for the pleasure of Krishna, then it's not speculative knowledge. That's how you get over it. Bhakti can overpower it. And then you have to be really, meticulous about your inner bhakti life. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Haridas Thakur appeared, Melcha family.
Yes.
So Lord Brahma came as Haridas Thakur. What are the circumstances? Why Lord Brahma came as Haridas Thakur?
There's different versions. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's version is when Mahaprabhu, after Brahma did his boo-boo, he that version is he went to Navadvip to undergo austerities to atone for this boo-boo, this mistake. And when he came to Navadvip and did his austerities, Mahaprabhu appeared and revealed his form. And they had some interactions, and he informed Brahma, "You will take part in my pastimes." And Brahma said, "Please make an arrangement that I won't become proud like this again." He said, "No problem. You'll become, Haridas Thakur, and you'll be born in a humble situation. You won't be proud." That's one version. Something else? Anyone? Let's close up. Anything online? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.